Today we're going to be making an Alpine cheese. Yes, Scylla, I know it's named after you. But we're going to use all of our goat milk in this one. You know, La Mancha milk will be fine in an Alpine cheese, I promise. So let's go back in the kitchen and get started. Again. Alpine cheeses are cheeses that come from, well, the Alps. There are any number of Alpine cheeses depending on what region of the Alps, what country. Basically, they were farmstead cheeses that people would take the summer milk from their cows that were on the lush mountainous pasture and preserve the milk for the winter by making a farmhouse-style cheese. So there's a lot of variety here. We're going to use our goat milk since we're a goat dairy, obviously, but our raw milk is going to help us to get those nutty flavors that the people using the cow milk would get from all that lush grass. I happen to have a piece of Alpine that I made. This has been aging about a year. Then I cut it up because it was a great big cheese and vacuum sealed pieces. So this is the only chunk of it that's left. But you can see it's a nice, hard, elastic, dense cheese. It's got just a beautiful nutty flavor to it. This one's been aged a very long time, so it's kind of sharp and it's got a, I don't know, just a beautiful bouquet. Lovely cheese. So we're going to try to do this again. We will be using 8 gallons of our goat milk, which we are putting into our pot over here and heating up to 92 degrees. We're going to use a packet of this thermophilic culture. These are the little individual ones. I just happen to have some of these on. The recipe calls for half of a packet for a 2-gallon batch. I'm going to use a whole packet for an 8-gallon batch since we're using our raw milk here. I think that's going to be plenty. If you have different like bulk thermophilic cultures, you can go ahead and use any of them that you have. Just for reference, some of the cultures in this one are S. thermophilus, DS vulgaris, and S. helveticus. I probably said that wrong. Let this culture set up on the top of your milk for a couple of minutes and rehydrate, and then we're going to stir it in. It's been a couple of minutes, and I'm going to stir this culture in now that it's rehydrated with an up-down motion like this. And turning the heat off on the stove. I always like to turn it off a couple of degrees below my target temperature because the residual heat in the stove and in the pot itself will help to continue to bring that heat up, and we don't want to get it too hot. Once this is all mixed in very well, put a lid on it and let it sit for 90 minutes. Okay, it's been 90 minutes now and it's time to add the rennet. I'm going to use this animal rennet. I have taken 2 teaspoons of it and put it in about a 1/4 cup of water. I'm going to work that into this milk. Now this milk had such a long ripening time because remember we used a thermophilic culture, but we had the temperature rather on the low side for a thermophilic culture. That's why it was left to acidify for that 90 minutes. Now this is going to start to set up after about 20 or 30 minutes, but we want to let this sit with the rennet to set up for a full hour. It's been an hour now on these curds and we're going to cut them. When we get to the end of cutting all this, we want them to be in about 1/4 inch pieces, but we're going to start bigger and work really slow. I'm going to start by doing about 1/2 inch cuts vertically, and while this is sitting here, our temperature has dropped down to just under 89 degrees, so I'm going to turn the heat on a little bit while I'm doing this and try to get our temperature up just a little. I'm not going to forget that I turned that on because I've done that before. And now I'm going to use my ladle just to go down and make horizontal slices best I can at 1/2 inch intervals. And don't worry if this isn't perfect, we'll have time to fix it up later. Alright, now we're going to let that sit up for 5 minutes just to let the edges of these curds heal a little bit. Okay, these have healed up for 5 minutes and we're going to start going through them just with our ladle and a knife to break up the big chunks. And then after that, once they've started to heal a little more, we're going to start going through gently with the whisk to break everything up into about 1/4 inch pieces. So let's start with the knife because there are going to be some massive pieces down at the bottom. Now meanwhile, while we're waiting for these to cut, we have got a pot of hot water over here heated up to 120 degrees. And we're going to cook these curds similar to the way that we do Gouda, where we replace some of the whey with the hot water. And what that's going to do is slow the acidification of the curds, while at the same time the heat will start shrinking the curds and actually scalding them and cooking the curds. Okay, I think I've got most of the big chunks broken up in here, so I'm going to start using the whisk to gently break things up even more. I'm just kind of going to lift the curd, kind of get the whisk under the big pieces and break it up. I've got this where it is mostly broken up now. There are a couple big pieces, so I'm going to continue to stir for 5 minutes at 92 degrees. And just to let the edges heal, make a nice skin on them. And I'm just going to use my knife to break up anything real big that I find coming up in there. Okay, I've stirred these for about 5 minutes, and we're going to let them sink to the bottom now. After it sinks to the bottom, we want to replace 25% of the whey with the hot water. So we're going to let them sink and then scoop a lot of this whey off of here. I don't want to be sticking my hand down in here to use the spigot to drain this off, so I'm just going to use this cup measure to pull it off and put it into another pot. The pigs will be so happy. That looks like about 25% of it. Now we're going to gradually add this hot water in while we're stirring, and we want a target temperature of about 108 to 110 degrees. I'm going to pop my thermometer back in this side, and my water got a little cooler. It's down to about 118, so I'm going to heat that up while we're doing this. And I'm just going to use the cup measure again to pour it in, mix it up, and keep going. You want to make sure that you're not letting any of it mat on the bottom of your pan. So make sure you're getting it all up off the bottom as you stir. We've got all that water put in here now, but our temperature is still only about 102 degrees. So I'm going to turn the heat on it on low and slowly bring this temperature up to 107. Then I'm going to turn the heat off because remember, it's going to continue to go up a couple of degrees after that. And I'm going to continue to stir while I do that. Any of these bigger chunks of curd you can still see in here, feel free to grab those with your knife and get them all cut to size. We're up a little over 108 degrees now, and I'm just going to keep stirring until we have the curd dried out. Some of these are starting to look good. Some of them still have juicy centers, so it's probably going to need about another 10 minutes of stirring. Let me pull some of these out and let's show you the difference. I'm getting dry ones. Come on, let's find a juicy one. Well, this one's kind of stuck in with others, but if you look at it, I don't know if you can see, it's kind of got a, I don't know, wet center still. It's not the same texture all the way through. So you want to keep stirring until they get all the same texture all the way through and kind of lose that custardy middle. And then what you should be able to do is take a handful of them, and by pressing lightly, they should want to stick together. And then we're starting to get there. See, they're wanting to stick together, but they need a few more minutes stirring. Okay, these are about ready. They've lost their juicy centers. You can see they're wanting to kind of stick together. See when you squeeze them? So we are going to move this pot over to the sink to drain this whey out. And then it's time to put it in the mold. I'm going to use this large cheese mold and a piece of cheesecloth. Get my cheesecloth wet in the whey here. And what I want to do is kind of consolidate all of these curds into one corner. This is a very dense textured cheese. You don't want a bunch of holes. So by kind of working it all into a ball here, helps to break up any holes, fill in any holes that there might be. Get this out of the way. Get our cheesecloth spread in the bottom of the pan and try to get all of this stuff now on top of the cloth. Alright, that's about as good as that's going to get. Let's try to shove all this down into our mold now. Alright, pick up the little stragglers and it's time to go to the cheese press. Okay, let's go get this in the cheese press. And we're going to press it for 30 minutes at 20 pounds. Then we'll flip it and increase the weight. Okay, let's take the weight off, flip this cheese, and put the weight back on it afterward. I burnt the edge of my cheesecloth there. I'm not sure how. That's what the brown mark is. These have been boiled, so it's sterilized. Alright, so let's take it out. It's very elastic feeling. Alright, flip the cheesecloth on it the other way. Mold. Back in the mold for 30 minutes at 30 pounds now. Okay, time to flip again. And this time we're going to put it with 50 pounds on there and let it sit for 3 hours. Oof, if I can get this out. And then we're going to flip it again and let it go another 3 hours at 50 pounds, which would probably put us sometime around 3 o'clock in the morning, so I'm not sure I'm going to get up and pull it out at that point. So it might just sit there at 50 pounds till morning, and that's just the way it's going to roll here. Sticking a little bit. You can see how the rind is starting to get smoother as we go. It's still got a lot of residual heat in it. Here we go. Just gonna flip it and do it again. Good morning. Last night I mixed up this saturated brine with a pound of kosher salt, half a gallon of water, half a tablespoon of calcium chloride, and half a teaspoon of vinegar. And then I put it in the refrigerator to let it chill down. It's supposed to be about 54 degrees. It's a little lower right now. Let's get this cheese out of the press and we'll weigh it and put it in the brine. It needs to brine for an hour and a half per pound, so let's see how heavy it is. Okay, we weighed this. It's about 6.5, almost 7 pounds. So we're gonna let this go about 9 hours or so in the brine. It's sticking a little bit to the cheesecloth, trying to pull it slowly. Remember, this ended up pressing a little longer than it should have because I didn't feel like getting up in the middle of the night to take it out of the press and put it in the brine, so that's completely my fault. But it's coming off. Alright, pretty good. A couple little cracks there, but hopefully that'll be okay. And it's going to float in your brine, so take a bit more kosher salt and sprinkle it over the top. Remember, we're going to flip this about halfway through, so in about 4.5 hours we'll give this a flip. This has been in here about 9 hours now. So I'm going to take it out and dry it off. Let it sit on the counter for a couple of days to get good and dry. At that point you can put it in your cave, or I think I'm going to wax this one. I've got several things coming up in the next few weeks that it won't get the kind of care it deserves in the cave if I don't wax it. So that's the plan on that one. Thank you again for watching. Good luck with your Alpine cheese. Please take the time to subscribe and like and share. Thank you. What? I'm trying to record. I'm waiting for you to close the door.